Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Club Junkie podcast. Another week here, another week down, another week closer to Christmas. So it is rapidly approaching. I am totally not ready. I don't think I am. I really need to go through and check. I'm terribly organized when it comes to holiday shopping and all that. So I need to figure it out. But I think I'm pretty good. I think I'm all right. But before we get into today's episode, just want to let you know this episode brought to you by Titleist, Pro V1, and Pro V1X. We all have different ability levels and goals, but one thing we share is a desire to bring our best every time we tee it up. And it all starts with choosing a golf ball you can trust. The Pro V1 is the best combination of speed, spin, and feel in the game. And the X gives you a higher flight and firmer feel. Both deliver long distance, consistent flight, soft feel, and all important drop and stop greenside control. So whether you're Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, or Nelly Korda competing at the game's highest levels, or simply striving to be the best you can be, tee up a Pro V1 or Pro V1X and always bring your best. So check out Titleist.com, see which Pro V1 is right for you, and it's also a great holiday gift if you're you got a golfer on your list and you don't know what to get them. When I worked at a shop. It was like Pro V1s they flew out the door at this time of year. Everybody came in just said, "Hey, I need to get some golf balls." Nobody had any clue. Pro V1s were an easy sell, and and nobody will be disappointed, I don't think, if you get them a box of Pro V1s or Pro V1Xs, that's for sure. So anyway, episode here is going to be a little different. I don't have anything to currently right now to review. I've got a few things sitting in the corner here that I just haven't got to the range with yet. Again, being kind of holiday, being the weather, being everything, I haven't got them to the range yet, but I have some pretty cool irons, a really cool wedge that I can't wait to talk about. But I haven't got them out on haven't got them out in the short game area, haven't got them out in the range, anything. So unfortunately, don't have the ability to talk about them yet. And then anything that new that is coming out, I either don't have it yet or we can't talk about it yet. So it's one of those two. It's just a weird kind of 2 weeks or so that you can't. You struggle to find, so especially in the north a little bit, it's just harder to find exactly what you want to hit and get out and hit it and all that stuff. So I got an interesting one though this week, and I think it's going to cause some amazing comments. I think between I know it's a podcast, so you can't really put comments in podcasts very easily unless you're watching on YouTube. If you search Golf WRX Radio, or you follow me on Instagram, the Club Junkie or Club Junkie Pod. Either one of those you can comment, and it's going to be interesting because I was sitting there last night, I was talking to my wife, and I was like, God, I need to go record my show. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And then I don't know why it popped in my head, but I was like, let's do the 10 clubs that I hate that all you golfers love. So we all have, like, every golfer, we all have stuff that we absolutely love from back in the day, stuff that's iconic, stuff that we either, got us into, clubs or got us into aftermarket shafts or whatever it was. Like, we all have that kind of stuff that we either played long ago and we just loved. And whether everyone else loved it or whatever, there's been a lot of, like, cult-type classics in terms of shafts, clubs, whatever. So I figured I'll go through it. And there are a few that I don't like. And I think I've expressed, like, the number one, which is, I think, one that I've expressed a lot. If you listen to this show, if you listen to TG2, Tursky always kind of seems to bring them up because I think he knows it's kind of one of my hot buttons. Or not hot buttons, but just something I disagree, and I'm in the vast minority of that. So I think these 10 items, most of them are clubs. There's a couple shafts in there. But most of them here, I think I'm going to be in the minority in terms of not liking them. And some of the reason can be is, I have more than one reason, but a lot of it is I didn't hit these products well. They didn't work for me. And, that's fine. And that's the thing. I'm not saying these are bad products. They're just stuff that I didn't like. They were all good products, and they all still have kind of a following, I think, today, or at least most of them do. I know at least the top couple still have people who either play them or have them in a bag or a backup bag or something like that. So those will be a little more interesting. The first couple, who knows? I mean, that's why I ranked them the way I did. And again, kind of like I guess also the kind of the ranking in terms of severity, in terms of how much I disliked stuff. So number one is the one it's the one that everybody disagrees with me. It's the one I don't like the most, but we'll get to that one. But I thought it'd be interesting because I think, like I said, golf equipment is very subjective, especially when you get to look, feel, all that. And then you get into the performance side. And that's why there is so much equipment because Some stuff works for you, some stuff doesn't. It just depends. You got to go try it or get fit or whatever, and you'll find what does work and what doesn't. But these are the 10 clubs, or I'm going to call it clubs, but the 10 golf items that I hate, and most of you guys probably really liked or loved. So we'll get into the start of it at number 10, which is Scotty Cameron's Studio Design. Remember they were kind of that blackish, that shiny black, rainbowish type finish. That whole line of putters, the Studio Design, there was like a 1, a 1.5, a 2, a 2.5. They all had slightly different necks, slightly different head shapes. They were back in I think they made them between 2000. I think they started in 2001, I think. And they were getting to the end of their life when I was working at a shop, and it was I think they ended in 2004, maybe 2005. Excuse me, got a little tickle in the throat there. The Studio Design, so they were all black. It was it wasn't a plated finish. It was kind of shiny. It was like an oil cannish type finish. Some of them got to be kind of rainbowish, and they were beautiful, and I loved the finish on them. But the finish and the head cover were pretty much about where it ended for me with the like of them. I did own, I think I owned a 1.5 or a 1.5 and a 3 at one point. I think I owned both. And I think the 3 that I got was pretty beat up, and I got it to refinish it. And I remember soaking it in CLR, take the black finish off, which was kind of pitted and beat up anyway. And then I kind of sanded out some of the dings and all that, and I was going to refinish it. And I think I did some stuff to it, like I used some of that Casey's blackening solution or whatever. I mean, I think I did some stuff to it, but it never looked that amazing after the finish was gone. The raw steel on it was fine, but like I said, my refinishing work wasn't amazing. But I just didn't like any of the head shapes. I know I own 2 of them, and I just admitted that. But I think at that time it was more just the fact that I was enamored with. It was probably, I wouldn't say it was my first Cameron or anything like that. My first one was a Pro Platinum mid. What was it called? The Pro Platinum Mid Sur, the belly putter. That was my first Cameron ever. But I think by the time I got a hold of these, they were older. They weren't brand new, anything like that. But when I was working in the shop, they were there, and I didn't love the head shapes. They were kind of that old classic design. I preferred something that was standard, kind of answer 2, or in Scotty's case, Newport 2, or some of the blades, or some of the mallets. But I just weren't really into the head shapes. And even looking back now, there's not one of them here that I would really game. But I think I owned I think it was a 1.5 and a 3. The 1.5 I think was in pretty good shape. I think I played that for a little bit, dumped it, and then a few years later or whatever, got a 3 just to mess around with refinishing and paint filling and all that stuff. But the finishes were beautiful. The head covers were awesome. I love the yellow head cover on it. I'll give those two things to them. But other than that, like I said, the head shapes just weren't me. They were all really small. They were really thin from face to back, which I guess now playing a Bettinardi BB8W, I kind of like the wider, fatter looking blades if I'm playing a blade. And these things were all kind of thin, narrow. They weren't super heavy. They were kind of light heads. And the finish, if you didn't take care of it and oil it with a little rag and all that stuff, it didn't hold up great. And like I said, they just, and I thought the feel on them was a little firm. They had a really, really shallow milling on them. The face was almost barely milled, and they just were kind of firm from what I remember. And maybe part of it was the balls back then that you played. They weren't quite as advanced as they are nowadays in terms of being a firm core but a soft cover and all that. But I overall never putted great with them. I just didn't like any of the head shapes, and I thought they didn't feel the most amazing, in terms of putters. I really liked the Pro Platinum and the Studio Stainless stuff way better in terms of feel and sound and all that. So the Studio Design was just not my favorite. I went back, and when I was putting this together, I was looking up all the just Google image, the Studio Design stuff, and just going through, and I was like, yeah, even right now, there's not one. If somebody gave it to me and said, here you go, you can have this for free, there's not one that I would put in the bag right now. I guess if you put a gun to my head, you have to. I guess I would play. I guess the 1.5 again. I mean, that's the one that kind of looks closest to a Newport 2 from at least from address. But maybe the 5, that little kind of mallet. But I remember that was kind of a weird single bend shaft that went into it. So yeah, I mean, right now, like I said, even if you handed me one and said, here, play it, I probably wouldn't. And, there's a lot of people who love these things. We sold a ton of them when I worked at the shop. Like I said, they were at kind of the end of their life cycle and probably 03, 04. That's probably when I started. I probably started like 02, 03, something like that. So they were kind of the end of the life cycle, but we sold a ton of them. I remember tons of people coming in and buying the pivot tool that went into the head cover because it always fell out, and they'd lose it, and you had a rack of those things in the pro or in our shop, and people would just come buy them. They were like $20 a piece, and they'd just buy like 3 of them at a time because they knew they were going to lose them again. But the yellow head cover was beautiful. Some of the rainbowish finish on those was awesome. I wish they still were able to offer that finish in when you send it to Scotty. They don't anymore. They stopped it a long time ago. I guess whatever it's made of or whatever it's on there is kind of a hazardous material or not very environmentally friendly, so it's not something that they do anymore. But it was beautiful back then, and when it was in the sunlight, they looked awesome. But again, the Exotic Camera Studios on, I didn't like it. It's not a putter that I really was into, and thankfully, I'm still not. So I can't say that. Like I said, I don't even care to really get my hands on one to try it again. I was like, it might be cool to like go through this list and then go out on eBay and kind of buy all these things and then try them again and see how I feel about them now, but. I'm not going to do that. And the studio designs I haven't looked on eBay, but I'm willing to bet they still carry a decent price. Most Camerons do, so I'm willing to bet that they can still carry a decent price, and I don't think I'm going to get that approved through my expense report through my boss. So we'll see. But studio design, number 10, just not my favorite putter line. So number 2 is an interesting one because this one I feel like it may be a bigger jump, and this is right around, I wouldn't say right around, it was a little after I got into really, like I said, I got on Bomb Squad Golf back in like, early 2000s, and then in 2006 jumped over to WRX, and I've been kind of here ever since. So this is kind of right around when I was, on Golf WRX, kind of, I think Bomb Squad was around at the same time still, but a driver that absolutely everybody loved. I don't know what happened. It wasn't for me, I guess. It just wasn't my club. But the Adams Golf Speedline 9032 LS. So there was a handful of Speedline drivers that did really, really well. I mean, there was an F11, there was an F10, both did pretty well. The 9032 LS, though, was kind of like the baddest of the bunch. I mean, when it came out, everybody seemed to be playing this driver. Everybody was trying to find this head. Everybody was trying to get one used. Everybody was trying to put some type of aftermarket shaft in it. It was just, at the time, it was super low spin. The ball speeds were crazy hot. The look was really good. When you set it down, it was really simple. Kind of had this, pretty classic shape to it. And then it had at the time, aerodynamics. They kind of had these, kind of had a deep center section, and it kind of flared out. From address, it just looked like a normal driver, but the bottom it kind of had a deep center, and it kind of flared out, almost like a boat V-hull. On the sides, and it was supposed to be more aerodynamic and all that. And I remember reading some reviews of guys talking about they could hear the the difference, and the aerodynamics were so huge, and that change was amazing. But it was a driver that it was an absolute cannon, and I think a lot of really high spin, high speed players absolutely loved it, and it probably did work for them because it was at the time low spin and all that. As a guy who wanted to be, high speed, high swing speed, high spin guy, I never hit it that great. I never hit it straight. When I did hit it, yes, it went a pretty good ways. But I think I only hit it with like the stock Voodoo shaft, and at the Alta Voodoo that was kind of green. I think it was like the Voodoo they made in like that. The maroon color, and then they ended up making I think a green one, and then they might have made a blue one or something. There were a couple of versions, and that shaft was touted as something I think that was much better. It was touted as much better than it really was. But I hit it with a stock shaft. I never hit it great. It kind of was all over the place for me. I didn't feel like it was a super forgiving driver when you did hit it, kind of heel toe. For me, at least, it was kind of all over the course. I could get it in the air and I could launch it. It was fine, but I just never went straight. It was never the longest driver for me. And this is kind of around 2009-ish, 2010-ish, I think, was when I went back and looked up to try to get an exact date. I think it might have been launched in 9 and ran through into 10 before they got rid of it. But at the time, I just, I never hit it that great. It just wasn't, it wasn't a driver that was ever the longest for me, or, never hit any crazy bombs. I remember, I think the sound and feel were pretty good. I don't, it's been now 13 years since 12 to 13 years since I've hit it. But sound feel was I remember that I think being pretty darn good. I just like I said, when I found the center, it went pretty good, but at the time I was probably hitting something else that was better, whether it was a TaylorMade product or whatever. Actually, no, it wasn't TaylorMade because that was like the burner line, so that wasn't that definitely wasn't that. So I was probably playing like a Callaway. But either way, the 9032 LS just it wasn't me. Like I said, and I think it just wasn't forgiving enough. I think if I was a better player and I could have like got the ball in the center more often, it probably could have been. And maybe if I was able to pop a different shaft in there or something like that. But that was pretty much the infancy of my club building days, and the amount of money I had at the time was probably not a ton to go out and get a bunch of crazy shafts. But it just never worked for me. And I remember reading all the reviews and everybody talking about it and raving about it. And I finally got my hands on one and hit it, and then I was so bummed because I think I had my hopes set high. I was excited. I was about ready to get blown away, and it just didn't happen. So, and again, I'm not saying it's a bad driver. It's one of those ones those have to be pretty cheap. I should see if I can snag a head off eBay and see how it works and see how it goes and see if it's actually better than I remember, or maybe I can swing it a little better now. But back then, I just never kept it in the fairway, and it never was crazy long or anything like that for me. So it unfortunately was one that I didn't love, and I was always bummed because I read so much about so much success, and I had none of that success with it. So the 9032 LS for the Speedline, the Adams, it was kind of the pinnacle time of Adams drivers, and unfortunately Adams didn't design them for me. But another great head that some of you may remember, and like I said, some of you may be in the forums raving about it yourself. It just unfortunately wasn't for me. But the 9032 LS was great. And then we get into the first shaft on the list. I think I have two. But the first shaft on the list, and this one here, I think for most of us, was more of just like the pipe dream. We all wanted one. I think Anthony Kim played it. A handful of guys played it on tour. But the ever-popular, uber-expensive Matrix TP7X shaft. This was back when Matrix was just the pinnacle of shaft design. They were the ones. They were blowing everybody else out of the water, and they had a few different designs, but this was the first $1,000 plus driver shaft, at least that I ever knew of. I know there's a few out now. If you go over to some of the JDM equipment and all that, like what is it, Seven Dreams and stuff like that, they have some $1,000 plus shafts. This thing I think was $1,000 or $1,200 when it came out. I, of course, couldn't afford one. So I, like everyone else, dreamed of having one. I searched the BST and, like I said, back in the Pop Squad days, they were selling the candy lime painted versions for their lime green. They called them like candy lime green. They were selling them for like $1,200 or something like that. And they were supposed to be, I wouldn't say so much better, but they were touted as, if you don't have the green one, you don't really have one. But yeah, they were $1,000, $1,200, something like that. And they had this like ballistic, what is it, was Xylon or whatever was the thing that was big into it. It was a Xylon wrap, and it was something supposed to be like, ballistics grade or whatever, and it was supposed to have like just crazy hoop strength, like the strength of the roundness of it was supposed to be just crazy strong. And I think it had kind of like a really stiff tip section, and kind of had that lower launch, low spin profile. And of course, I couldn't afford one. I just lusted after them online, like most of us did, until a buddy of mine got one, and he got it. So he was a lefty, and his name's Scotty B. I don't know if he hangs out in the golf forums anymore. I unfortunately haven't talked to Scotty B in a long time. But my friend at the time, he was even a bigger equipment nut than me at the time. He got one. And he bought it off, a BST, whatever, and it was in I want to say like a high bore head or something like that, or a high bore XL head or something like that. But he was a lefty, and he bought a right-handed driver just to get the shaft out. So he had the right-handed driver. I happened to be at the driving range right when he brought it, because he brought it to the guy, one of our buddies who's a club builder. He brought it to him to pull the shaft and put it in whatever driver he was playing at the time. But it was in a right-handed head, so I was like, yo, can I hit it? And he was like, yeah, no problem. So he just let me hit like, a handful of balls on the range, and I was just like crazy excited to be able to actually hit this thing. I'd never seen one in person. It was kind of that matte black, the gold, the white and gold, like Matrix was in white, the TP7X was in gold. It was real simple, had kind of that whatever, the little bit of like engineering and Asian lettering, whatever, all up near the handle. But it was really simple. Remember hitting that, and I hit it pretty good. Like, it was actually kind of like a mid-low ball flight. I was hitting kind of these like mid-low bullets, really straight. I mean, seemed to be going a long ways, but it wasn't like, I think it was one of those, I built it up in my head as like the heavens were going to part as soon as you made contact, and the ball was going to fly, 3 miles and all this stuff. And it was going to do these things that no shaft could ever do because of its price and, all the materials in it and all this stuff. And it was going to do things that, no shaft could ever do. And I hit it, and it was good, but it wasn't, I think like with it, I would have needed either more loft in the head or whatever. And I hit it decent. Like I hit it, like I said, I hit it pretty straight. I remember, kind of almost where I was in the range hitting it. And it was just one of those kind of, I wouldn't say it was a disappointment, but it just didn't blow me away. And then, like I said, knowing that, I'd built up this thing, they say never meet your heroes. And it was kind of one of those situations where, you dreamed about it, you'd read all the specs, you'd memorized all the specs, all this stuff, and then you hit it and it's just kind of okay. And the club I was hitting at the time, I was hitting hitting better, hitting it farther, maybe not quite as straight, because that thing was, like I said, pretty darn straight, but it just ended up being an okay shaft. It was pretty stiff. I remember like it was tough to load. It was smooth. It didn't really have a whole lot of vibration to it, which was pretty nice. It just didn't have like much of a kick. And at the time, I probably swung a little faster than I do now. And I still remember like it was a little bit more on the boardy side. It was definitely a little more stiff than whatever I was playing at the time, which was probably at that point like, a Auto NV something. It might have been like an NV or an NV S, or maybe the VS Proto, or because it was kind of around at that same time, I believe. But yeah, it's just one of those things that I think I set the expectation too high, and it just didn't meet them, didn't come close, and I ultimately was kind of happy that I never spent the huge dollar amount to get one, even a pull on the secondary market. So it was a little bit of a bummer, but I think that's one of those things that it kind of also going forward kind of like set me up to where no matter what you read, no matter what the hype is, whatever, don't. It's still a golf club. It's still a golf shaft. What it's going to do is what it's going to do. And it's not going to change your life. It's not going to, you're not going to hear like this heavenly, like, oh, opening up as you take each swing. So don't expect that with any piece of golf equipment. So, but it was a good shaft. It was decent. It was one of those, I hated it after that because I was just, to me, it wasn't that great. And then from then on, everything I read about them, I just didn't understand why anybody was spending that kind of money on them. So from there on, I kind of hated it, and I kind of laughed at stuff that people were still lusting after them, much like I was before it, and never after that cared to try to get one. I don't know if they even exist on eBay anymore, or God, what kind of condition the pulls would be. It'd be interesting again to hit it now and see what it's like. Put it in the head with a decent amount of loft and just see what would happen. But those things by now, if you have a TP7, if you have a TP7X somewhere, willing to bet it's been in like 10 driver heads. Because I mean, if you had it, why not? I remember after a while, you'd see the ones that kind of broken. The tips would snap, or they'd be really rough. People would turn them into fairway shafts and all that. So, but the TP7X ended up being a club or a shaft that just didn't do it for me. I mean, after I hit it, which thankfully I did, and thankfully I never spent like the $600 or $500 on a pull, like I thought about doing a few times. So TP7X, I know a lot of you remember it. Came in a handful of colors. I think they, like I said, Bombcode, I think they had lime green. I think they had a red one, but the black was, I think, kind of the one that was out there, and that's the one, Matrix kind of sold originally, but not for me. Wasn't a big fan of it. So the next one, I think we'll get a little more, because the TB7X was one of those, if you'd remember it, if you were deep into the woods on custom shafts at the time. If you weren't, probably not something that you really care about that much then. This one could be a little more interesting. I know that there's a lot of people out there on Instagram and stuff like that who love these, but I hate the Kirkland signature wedges. I just do. And I'm not saying, like I said, when I say hate, I'm not saying that it's a bad club, because it's not. If you own them and you like them and you hit them great, that's awesome. I'm glad. Yeah, they're a great deal. I think for the price, You can't beat it, and the wedges are, excuse me, they're a great price. They're like what, 160, 170 bucks for 3 wedges. They look pretty good. The finish on them is pretty solid. They actually feel pretty decent and spin. They felt softer than I thought they would, and they actually spun pretty decent. They've got a decent milled face. They had some good spin around the greens. When I tested a set, I went out and I saw them at a store, and my boss was like, grab 2 sets, and I reviewed one of them. But the problem I have with them is that everybody raves that these things are the most amazing things in the world, and they're such a great value. Excuse me, and they kind of are. But they only come in one loft set, 52, 56, 60. That's it. And again, depending on the demographic you're looking at, getting at, which is a Costco shopper, they may have a slightly older iron set in their bag that may match up with because the pitching wedge is weak enough. But realistically, anybody who's probably buying these is a little bit more avid golfer and probably has a set that's at least somewhat newer and probably plays off like a 45 pitching wedge or something close to it, where then the gapping doesn't necessarily work out. A 45 pitching wedge to a 52 gap to a 56 sand wedge, you've got a huge gap between pitching wedge and gap wedge. You can't get like a 50, 54, 58. You can't get anything else in these. They make them one way, and that's it. The sole is good if you're a picker, or you play in firm conditions. The leading edge is crazy sharp. The leading edge is crazy sharp going into the sole, and for me, they dug like shovels. Divots were probably some of the larger I've hit since I've hit probably like Epon Tour wedges, which again had very little bounce, but didn't have a ton of bounce. Super sharp leading edge. They got into the turf and they just kind of stayed in there. They didn't want to get themselves out. The wider soles did play okay in the trap if you open the face up. If you're a player who wasn't kind of, didn't really know how to play out of a trap and kind of left them square, they probably weren't great out of the trap. The leading edge on the 52 is just way too rounded. When you set it down into dress, it's got that little bit of offset, and the transition from hosel into the leading edge is just way too rounded for my eye. I just don't like the look. And the 52 kind of, to me, could have looked a little more compact to kind of flow a little better with the set. But yeah, I mean, I just, like I said, I think the sole design is kind of not for me. It's for, an average to shallow swing, swing type player. If you play in soft conditions, they're probably going to dig. But, the other side of it, they do have decent spin, they do have decent feel. So, depending on the player, these things might work really well. Me, I hated them. I also looked at, there's absolutely no options. Yes, for the price of one brand name, big brand name wedge, you can get 3 wedges, but, you have 0 options. You get the shaft that's in it. The grip is garbage. I will say that, too. The grip is like a cheap rubber. You can tell it's not amazing. Not going to hold up for a long, long time. And this is coming from a guy who uses cheap grips. Realistically, the huge Kirkland signature on the back, that doesn't do it for me either. It just doesn't have a great look to it personally. But overall, I think that my biggest issue with it is just the little nitpicky things like, the really rounded leading edge on like the 52, and then also, not having any options in terms of bounce or all that. If you play in soft conditions, you're a steep swinger, you can't play these. Or I guess you can, but you're not going to find a ton of success. They're not going to play as well as other wedges. And yes, they're cheap. But there's a reason they're cheap, and part of that is because there are no options. So, me, I didn't love them. They're not something that I truly want to play. Like I said, I had a set. I played them for a couple rounds, and that was all I needed. I was good to go. I was done. So, the Kirkland signature wedges were number 7 on my list of clubs. And I know there's a lot of people out there who love them, and that's cool. Like I said, I'm not bashing your product, just why it didn't work for me. So at number 6, we're going to go with another thing that maybe more people probably play, more people dig, because I'm going to go with 3 kind of a set of things here. But the next thing on my list, things that I really didn't like, were the Mizuno JPX 800, 825, 850. So that 800 series of JPX Pros was just not an iron that I loved. And most of it stemmed from look. The look of the dress I just didn't love. I had a buddy who had, I think he had the 800s, and then his 800s I think got destroyed in a fire, and then he got 850s. So I hit his a handful of times. I've hit the 825s. The overall look in terms of like the badging side and all that, totally fine. Totally good with that. Totally get that it's it was grain flow forged, all that. Totally fine with that. I thought for a pro iron they had a little too much offset in the long irons, especially like the 4, 5, 6. And then when you got down to like 9 pitching wedge, there was a time for me that Mizuno just didn't have short irons done right, especially in the JPX line. In the 800, 825, and 850, I felt like the 9 iron pitching wedge they were just kind of big. They looked really big. I don't know if it was something with the shaping out near the toe. They just looked really large. They didn't look like they flowed with the set. And when you set them down, it wasn't something that was confidence inspiring to myself. Now the JPX line to me, especially when you get to like the 800 Pros and even the I haven't hit the 923s yet in terms of the forged or the tour, but the JPX, like the 800 Pros, 825, 850 Pros, they didn't feel as good as the MPs. They always were a little firmer, had a little more click to them. Mishits, definitely you could hear it more. And the only reason I say more because I had a buddy who had 2 sets of them, so I got to hit them a fair amount in terms of, throughout the couple years he owned them. I think he actually still has the 850s. I think they're still in his bag. But like I said, from a dress, I didn't like the shaping on the like at least 9 pitching wedge. I don't remember if the 8 was of that same kind of looks too large, didn't flow with the set. And then, like I said, the feel wasn't amazing. And then the long irons had more offset than they needed to have for an iron with a pro label. Personally, if you're going to put a pro label on it, I think you should have pretty minimal offset throughout the whole set. And I felt like the long irons in these were kind of more than I like. So for these, it was more of a visual thing. There was a little bit of feel, but again, JPX series is, the MP is always kind of the gold standard of Mizuno. So the JPX stuff typically doesn't feel quite as good. But the JPX Pro 800, 825, 850, just like I said, visually, I felt like they just didn't look as good. And especially when you then set down like an MP series and it was just beautiful. You get to these and it was just kind of almost like the short irons were phoned in or they didn't figure it out. Now the new stuff, the 900 stuff plus, they did a much better job with the short irons especially. Looks way more compact. They flow with the set, and they've kind of cleaned up a little bit of some of the offset. I feel like in some of the 900, 920. What is it, the 900, 915, 921, and now, well, like I said, we'll see in the Forge and the Tour, the 923s. So, interesting to see. I could almost toss in the 923 Hot Metal Pro into that category in terms of I don't really love the look. I think it's got too much offset. I think it's too big of an iron. But these, like I said, stem more for visual. I could still play them if, I can get over the visual side of it. But I know there's a lot of people who played them. A lot of people who loved them. I wasn't one of them. So they were never a set of irons that I really lusted over or cared about or cared much to get my hands on after I hit them. And after I saw them, they just were kind of, mediocre to me. So I know a lot of you probably out there played them, maybe still even have some in your bag. And again, not knocking what's in your bag, because if it works for you and you like it, hell yeah, rock on and keep going with it. So we get to number 5, I think we're on. Yeah, 5. Geez, I should really keep better track of this. 5 is a driver. That was even played on tour for a whole long time by a man named Brant Snedeker. Played the thing forever, and that would be. And there's kind of a handful of them. I'm going to pick up this one because I think all of them were not really something that I liked. But I'm going to knock on just one of them in terms of naming it, and that's going to be the TaylorMade Burner Superfast TP. So they made a Tour Burner TP, they made a Superfast TP, and they made a Superfast 2.0. All those burners that have this triangular double wing or wing shape were just horrendous looking. They were terrible. I know a lot of people played them, and the TP badge is on it, which I still agree. It's an absolute travesty that TaylorMade hasn't brought back the TP badge. It was one of the coolest things they ever had. But the Burner Superfast TP, I never hit it well. Every single one of them I ever looked at, even with the TPs, looked shut. Even though they claimed it was like a slightly open club face, they never looked open to me. And maybe it's just the way that shaping of the head, sat on the ground or something. All of them look closed. Everyone that I ever had my hands on. Like I said, the shaping was horrid. It was a triangle, then it had this big bowed out wing thing. The super fast TP version had like this lattice type paint, honeycomb type paint on the top, that just added to the distraction of what it was. The Soul was pretty cool because it was pretty sleek and clean. Had the big number 1 on it for a driver. I actually thought that was kind of cool. And I actually did like the Matrix HD series shafts that went in them. Those two things I really liked. I was a big fan of the HD. I hit that shaft pretty well. But overall, the head for me, I hated the look. I didn't think they looked amazing for a TP model. They kind of looked to me kind of cheap. And again, it was one of those drivers I just never hit well. To me, I don't think it was like crazy low spin or anything like that. I thought it was probably one of the things that was kind of spinny. The 46-inch stock length didn't really help either. Being a short guy, being a guy that doesn't hit it very accurate and very straight, 46-inch drivers were not something that did well for me. So, with this thing, I would have to cut it down. Back then, I had no way of a hot melting or anything like that. So then I had a super light head. But it was just a driver I never hit well. I hated the shape. I didn't like the look. Dual crown technology is what it called. It was dual crown to increase the CG, for high launch and low spin. Excuse me. And I don't think that was necessarily the case, that it was crazy low spin or anything like that. Again, it'd be interesting to get ahead and put it up against today's heads and see what kind of spin numbers and ball speed numbers and all that. But, like I said, the shape of it was horrible. I didn't like it. And again, I think part of that is if you set down a club, you don't like the look of it, you don't like how it's shaped or whatever, you're probably not going to hit it great. And I never hit it well. And I never hit the Tour Burner well. I never hit the 2.0. The 2.0 to me, I didn't like the white. I felt like the white chipped when you just looked at it. Everybody I knew who had a Superfast 2.0, there was even guys who were like meticulous, used head covers, whatever, they had a chipped one. There was a chip somewhere on that head. I don't know if it came that way or it was just one of those, like I said, you breathed on it wrong or a T caught it the right way. Every one of them was chipped. They seemed like they couldn't hold the white paint. Them and the RBZ just couldn't hold paint. But the Superfast 2.0 was just not a driver that I really cared to ever play. I hit it. Again, back then I got whatever I get my hands on, I got to hit it. And at this point, I don't know if I was in a shop at the point. I think this was like 2010. I probably was out of the shop at the time, but I still knew all the guys there, so I'd go to the range and hit all the demos. And it was just not a driver that I thought was very good. And sure, Snedeker might have won some money with it, but it was not for me. So number 4. Now these top 4 I think are ones that again will be a little more sensitive to people because they are clubs that I think people absolutely loved. And again, I'm not knocking anything that might be in your bag. It didn't work for me, and why I hated it. But it's one that I continue to not like to this day, and I hate the fact that this company is unfortunately in the top 4 twice. But the OG original Ping Answer 2 putters, the ones that had the little sound slot, they're cast out of kind of like a bronzish material. And I know everybody absolutely loves them. They're usually like a pretty decent, price. If you find one somewhere, you can usually get them pretty inexpensive. You can kind of find them sometimes at like Goodwill stores or whatever. I just don't like them. I don't like the look. They're just small looking, especially again from face to back. They look super thin. The finish on them just turns me off. And I know today is the day of the fanciest millings and all that you can see, and the finishing is absolutely second to none. And I get it. You're kind of spoiled with that stuff. But even back when I first started kind of playing golf again back in like 2000, 2001, and things weren't necessarily, I mean, Cameron milled some stuff or whatever, but it wasn't, mill marks everywhere. I just don't like kind of the unfinished, pitted, rough look of these. Like they knocked them out of the mold, didn't do any, didn't run even a piece of sandpaper over them, and just put them out there. And I understand, like I kind of get the whole, like the PO box thing and all the stuff or whatever in the what do you call it? In the cavity, that's kind of cool. I get that. I don't love the finish on it. The darkness part, that I'm okay with. But the finishing is just so rough and just not great. And I feel like it wouldn't have taken much to make it look better. Throw it in one of those like tumbling things, like those big vats where you put like not rocks, but you put like a rock type material and they vibrate through. It would have made that alone would have made them look 1,000 times better. They just look really cheap and really rough to me, and I've never liked looking at them. The headweights are really, really light. They're a pain in the butt to reshaft with like the ball bearing in there or whatever, however they were pressed in to keep the shaft in place. And then honestly, I don't really like the sound on them. With that sound slot in the bottom, they kind of have it added, which is why the company's ping. It had that little extra ping to it on impact, and the click isn't bad, but the little added high-pitched kind of frequency that gets added in there, just not a big fan. I've got some putters that have a little ting to them, and I putt terribly with them. I will never get a putt to the hole with them because I'm trying not to hit them very hard, so I don't have to hear that sound. And these are just part of it. And I know there's people who have like 100 of these in a collection, and they've got ones that are worth a ton of money and all that. Totally get it. I totally understand. And I know sound and feel, totally subjective. So some people hit these and absolutely love them. I get it. No problem. But for me, not my thing. I'm never going to make a putt with one of these things. I will always leave it short because I'm going to try to hit it softly in order to, not have a high-pitched or loud sound out of it. And again, the weight portion, I play a really short putter, so these things, when you get them really short, they don't play great, or they don't feel great to me. But overall, a lot of it is just the absolute look of it. And they look like they're 200 years old, and somebody dug it out of the dirt, and it could be brand new. So the OG ping, answer twos, whatever that time, just not a putter that I really like. And again, I'm in the total minority. There's a lot of people who love them. And that's fine. And like I said, I totally understand it. I get, some of the nostalgic love. You're never going to find one in my bag. You're never going to find one in my collection. It's just, they're never going to be there. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not going to putt with it. They just weren't my thing. And I get, like I said, the history portion of it, all that is totally understandable. And I respect that, but it's just not a putter that's going into my bag anytime soon. So, and the next putter, or the next one, number 3, is a putter as well. So another putter that tons of hype, everybody loved, your boy couldn't putt with it, and that would be the Odyssey the Odyssey 2-ball. I remember when the 2-ball kind of came out. Again, working in a shop, we got 2 balls in, sold every single one of them we could possibly get our hands on. Especially that holiday, the first holiday I got to. You sold every 2-ball you could get your hands on. 2-ball alignment doesn't work for me. I never lined it up well. I was never accurate. I've tried to putt with a handful of them over the years, from the original to the DFXs to some of the others, even some of the new 10s and 11s. I've tried to putt with. 2-ball just doesn't work for whatever reason. For my eyes, I just don't line it up well. I never feel comfortable with it. I always feel like I'm fiddling with it to try to get it lined up to the target. I feel like I do a lot better with long straight lines. But yeah, the 2-ball and me, and a lot of them, I don't know if it's the way those kind of like rounded wings come out on the sides, but it doesn't frame the ball when I always feel like I'm aiming it left of target, just always. When I set it down, and I don't know if it's a combination of just like the double bend shaft into this head that has these roundy wings on it or what, but every time I set it down, I get it. I feel like I'm aimed up left to target. I just never feel like I've got it on target. I've never felt ever like I'm like aiming it right of target. It's just always I feel like it's looking left, and I've never putted well with one. So again, totally understand the history behind it, the respect that, all that. But I've used a handful of them over the years, or at least tried, and none of them work for me. I mean, I've tried the ones with the line on them, all that. It just, the 2-ball is just not my thing. And I know it worked for so many people, and it changed the game for so many people. Just doesn't change it for me. But like I said, something with the way that thing's shaped. I think it's the rounded wings that go into like the last ball in the back. Whatever it is, like I said, I always feel like I've got that thing aimed left, and I just never feel comfortable over the ball trying to putt with that thing. So, yeah, the 2-ball, just not something I truly love. I don't mind the feel of it and everything, especially back then when it had that original white hot insert, even like the OG one with that white hot OG insert. I'm cool with how it feels and all that. It's a pretty solid putter, but I can't line it up to save my life. So if you basically handed me that putter and said, hey, you could win $1 million by making this 10-foot putt with a 2-ball, probably not walking home with a dime. So Excuse me. So it's unfortunate, but I know a lot of people loved them. Not me. So number 2 is a shaft that was absolutely iconic. So many guys on tour played it. And I know shaft number 2, but the D amount of whiteboard, like the OG Flower Band whiteboard, not the S plus, not the D plus, or not the D plus, the absolute old school one that like Ricky just put like an old prototype back in play and all that. I think they launched in like 2006, and whiteboards were everywhere. I tried to play the poor man's whiteboard, which was the Grapholoid Pro Launch Red, and I played a few of those. Wasn't really my shaft. That was actually a slightly better shaft for me, I think, than the actual whiteboard. But the whiteboard I never hit well. One, I couldn't really afford one, especially brand new. 2, we had it when I was doing Callaway Demo Day stuff, we had it in the bin there in one of our demo things, but it was like a 73X. Still never hit it well. Always put it in heads, wanted to try it, especially back when it was like iMix. Remember iMix from Callaway? Then I would shove that thing in FT5, FT9 heads, FTIZs, whatever. They were in like every head. I would try it in there, never could hit it well. I think it's again one of those things where the softer handle section. I mean, back then I remember when that thing came out, it was like, oh, it was a stiff tip, and we were just starting to get into kind of like, a stiff tip and middle section, whatever. Those profiles were just starting to kind of catch on, and what you were kind of finding worked for you or didn't. And the whiteboard just didn't. I think it was the softer handle section. It was, again, a time when a lot of people were going up in loft and then putting like a really low spin shaft in there to kind of hit these high bombs. And the whiteboard just didn't do it for me. Like I said, I tried it in a handful of heads. Pretty much every head that, while it was out, every head that I got my hands on at Callaway, I tried it in, along with a few others. With my, I'd walk down to the TaylorMade tent or, the Nike tent or whoever, and hit their drivers as well. I tried the whiteboard. I can't remember how many times on demo day ranges or on club ranges, and just never hit it well. It wasn't so much a height thing, because I could offset that with a little more loft, and doing it on the range at a demo or whatever, I had access to a bunch of heads. So I mean, I could put a 10.5 head or 11 head or whatever on there. I just never hit it straight. I never hit it well. I hit the blue board a lot better. I remember I had a blue board in an FT5. Was like my first like brand new, ordered it that way, whatever. It was pretty cool, and it was like a 10.5 head or something like that with a 10.5 tour head with a blue board 73X, and it was that I hit actually really well. But the whiteboard just wasn't for me. I never hit it great. Again, it was kind of like the TP7X that I talked about. There was so much hype, so many people talking about it. Everybody was, getting one and putting it in their driver, and like, oh, I went up a little bit of loft and I'm hitting it so good. I never found it. It felt good. It was smooth. It had zero harsh vibration to it. The feel on it was really good, and it had a better kick than the TP7X. I mean, it definitely had a little kick to it, especially if you got it in like the right flex, right weight. Like a 63X, I remember hitting that, and that got close to like, wow, I could load it and it would unload, but the actual performance and on course stuff, when I took demos out to the course and all that, it never worked. I never hit it crazy long. I always hit some other combination better, straighter, farther. It was just it didn't work for my swing, and it's a little bit of a bummer, because it was one of those I wanted it to work so bad. I wanted to be like Tiger and all these guys on tour who were playing this thing. Just didn't work for me. So the whiteboard is one that I didn't necessarily love it. It was a great shaft. I mean, it really was. It's still, considered probably iconic in terms of the world of shafts. It's got to be one of the top shafts to ever really, take golfers by storm, but it just wasn't for me, and I didn't like it. So, and I know this podcast has gone on longer than I thought. Going with 10 items, I thought I could rip through it pretty fast. But the number one, and I know everybody probably knows it's number one, but Ping I2 irons. The I2 irons I don't like them. They don't look good to me. I don't like the look. I don't like the big pointy high toe thing. They have tons of offset. The hosel when it blends into the leading edge and even into the top line, it's got some curvature to it that I just don't like. And I understand that they were, again, extremely revolutionary. I respect the design aspect of where they came from and what they kind of accomplished. And I know the wedges are still coveted by a ton and, said to be the best wedge design ever. It's ugly. It's got absolute miles of offset. The shape is just, I just don't want to look at it. It's like a square. It's like the square drivers turned into an iron. The feel on them, from what I remember, I haven't hit one in a long time. And the feel when I remember hitting I2s, like a buddy of mine had them, and they were hard, they were firm. They didn't feel amazing. They weren't buttery soft. They were firm. They spun pretty well, and the grooves are like indestructible. They'll last they'll last through like a nuclear winter, and still be sharp, and they'll spin the ball. But they're impossible to wear out. I get that. They seem to have a ton of bounce. They play really well at traps and soft conditions and all that. But they just don't look good. They don't look good to me. I don't like the look. And if that's so drastic where these are, that I don't even want to swing them. They don't look good. They don't feel amazing. There's no part of them that makes me want to play them ever. And I've hit them very sparingly, but I understand guys like run out and they try to find like 1 through lob wedge sets that are matching serials or however they go. I don't understand that world, but I don't like them. And it's, like I said, it's nothing against if you're a guy who plays them or has them in a backup bag or whatever. I totally get that and I understand it, and that's cool, but you're never going to find a set of these in my bag. They're my most hated club, and I don't like the look. I don't like anything about. There's nothing about the look that I can say, hey, that looks. I'll give it this. The back badging, the ping I2 with the little circle in the middle, that's kind of cool. I'll give them that. The design there is not too bad. That's pretty cool. Other than that, there's nothing there that I really care for. But the I2s just are not my thing. Like I said, I think most people know over the years, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, anything like that, when that iron comes up, anybody else may rave about it. It's not my thing. So my number one hated iron out of all of golf, which again is probably an extreme minority that I'm in, ping I2s. So that is my top 10 list. I know this podcast went way longer than it really should have, but like I said, let me know what you think. Like I said, if you're on YouTube, search Golf WX Radio, and if you're on Instagram, check me out at Club Junkie Pod on there, and let me know what you think, because I think a lot of people disagree with me on some of these, and some people may agree. Who knows? We'll see. But those are my top 10 hated clubs. And that's all I've got this week. So hopefully you guys are getting ready for holiday. I know we're basically almost just a week away, but it's coming up fast. So hopefully you guys have a good weekend. If you can, get out and play some golf. And, if you're stuck doing holiday stuff, whatever, I totally understand. I'll be doing the same thing. So hopefully you guys have a good week. We'll talk to you next week.